What is up, YouTube? I'm Devon DaVinci, and I wanted to address one way that you can support the channel if that is something that you would like to do. We all need t-shirts, and if you happen to be in the market for a graphic tee anyway, why not check out my affiliation link at TeePublic. Here you will see different designs that I handpicked myself and new designs that will be added on a weekly basis. This week's featured item will be t-shirts themed after the IT Crowd, which is currently a show that I'm doing reactions to on YouTube. So if you happen to be a fan of that show, feel free to come through and check it out. And I will be adding t-shirts, as I said, on a weekly basis, so be sure to look at it not just once, not just twice, but on a weekly basis. Link to my TeePublic storefront will be in the description box down below. What is up, YouTube? I'm Devon DaVinci, leader of the Renaissance crew, and you're watching DaVinci Reacts. Today I'm going to be checking out a video that, at this point, it's kind of a joke. Because for those of you that know, I've been getting a lot of interesting responses, to say the least, to a video that I did called Star Spangled Banner as You've Never Heard It Before, or whatever it's called. And I've had so many people come to my my channel talking about how true and factual that video is. It's not. And how un-American I am for laughing or joking at it. Now, at the time when I reacted to the video, I didn't know a lot about the War of 1812. I didn't know a lot about the Battle of Baltimore. I didn't know a lot about what happened with Fort McHenry. I didn't know a lot about the origins of the Star Spangled Banner. But as I was watching the video, I felt like there was a little bit of embellishment, to say the least, with the video itself. And since that video, I've done a lot of different research into it, and I can now say that most of the stuff in that video was in fact wrong. The reason I was able to say it is because to me it had all the telltale signs of someone telling bullcrap. Now, normally you can pick up certain things. You know somebody that tends to lie a lot. A lot of times you don't have to be catching them in a lie to know that they're telling a lie. It's just that all the signs of their old lies are still here. And you're like, okay, something isn't right. I'm holding a distance. And the funny thing is when I watch videos of people actually debunking it, like actually watching or actually making videos that are just flat out debunking the information in that video, the people in the comment section's attitudes change. It goes from it being 100% fact to, oh, this is just a story, or it's just an allegory. You're not supposed to take it so serious, that's, that, and the other. But anybody, if you're making a video that is debunking the information in that video, or if you happen to be watching one or whatever else, if you feel that that is the case, that this is all an allegory and nobody takes it serious, I dare you to go into my comment section and look at the comments. I dare you. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and jump into this. This is the War of 1812, as done by my dude, Johnny D. Ruddy. Now, Johnny D. Ruddy does a lot of different videos related to historical events. In a very unique cartoony style. I've done videos of his before. If you enjoyed that, you're going to enjoy this. If you have a problem with this, then chances are you probably just have a problem with anything that talks about American history. Now, I'll probably go in on American history a bit in the past. I mean, after this video is done. Now, just know, again, I'm going to say this for those of you that might have issues hearing this. I do not have a problem with America as a country. I love America. I am an American. I definitely am proud to be an American. It's just at the same time, I'm not someone that's going to blindly follow everything that America does, because for those people out there that believe, oh, America is the greatest country in the world, this, that, and the other, I'm someone that has done research and has known some of the things that America has done in the past. So I can't sit here and be like America's the greatest, because we've done some pretty heinous things in the past. It's just that I can acknowledge that and hope America does better while still appreciating what America does that is good. America's not a perfect country, not by a long shot. There is no perfect countries as far as I can tell, unless some countries recently got discovered, and I don't think that's the case, but whatever. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. I will have a link for John D. Ruddy's channel at the end of this video. So at the last 30 seconds, you will see an icon pop up. If you click on it, it'll take you to the channel. You can watch, comment, like, all the other good stuff. And I will have a link for the original video in the description box down below. So if you do want to get the original video without me possibly talking, pausing, whatever else, that's the link that you will use. And, well, I guess if you're a reactor also and you want to get the source video, that's the link as well. But anyway, let's jump into this and see what has to be said. Hopefully he does touch on the Star Spangled Banner. But let's go ahead and do this. When I say I know hardly nothing about the War of 1812, I mean it. I studied the Battle of Baltimore.
North America had been colonized by Europeans. 13 of these colonies declared their independence from Britain in 1776, becoming the United States of America. The colonies north of the USA were known as Canada and remained under British control. Some Canadians were exiles from the States still loyal to Britain, and some others were French-speaking from a previous French colony lost to Britain. The Canadas prospered because of a very profitable fur trade. After the USA defeated Britain, USA was granted extra land west of their colonies, already inhabited by Native American nations, some who had historically been pushed west already. Many of these Native Americans believed in an independent nation, an Indian confederacy, many tribes having united under the leadership of Tecumseh and his brother. American expansionism was already well underway.
I know about Sitting Bull, I know about Geronimo, but I've never heard this Native American name before, ever. I might have to do another video on this person, because it sounds like it's pretty important if he united all the Native American tribes to like become a confederation. Sounds like an important event. That's probably something I probably want to look into. Like, people talk about American history, that is a part of American history.
Tecumseh and his brother. American expansionism was already well underway as they bought French Louisiana from Napoleonic France. Following the French Revolution, France ended up with an emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte, and the rest of the monarchies of Europe went to war against him, which became the Napoleonic Wars. Britain was one of these nations and prided themselves in naval superiority. Since their independence, the USA had built itself an impressive navy of its own. And amidst the Napoleonic Wars, the USA remained neutral. Britain struggled to keep its crew numbers for its ships. Some British sailors even fled to America to escape being press-ganged into the British Navy. The British did not like this, and the British Navy vessels began stopping and searching American ships for British deserters, even refusing to recognize British subjects becoming citizens of the USA. In 1807, the British warship HMS Leopard attacked and boarded the USS Chesapeake off the coast of Virginia. American merchant ships were also captured and cargo was seized as contraband by the British, despite American neutrality. All of this angered many Americans, and US President Thomas Jefferson laid on the Embargo Act of 1807, refusing to go to war against the British again. Tensions were rising against the British as they armed the natives and supported raids and indeed Tecumseh's war on the States, trying to stop USA expanding into the Canadas. And some Americans looked to the Canadas as their means of war. The added prospect of annexing the Canadas to the United States was a bonus. US forces outnumbered British forces in North America, but the British forces were better trained. While Britain was distracted by the Napoleonic Wars, now was the time. The new British Prime Minister tried to talk things out with the US, but the message was so long crossing the Atlantic. The United States Congress voted in favor of a declaration of war against...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about the War of 1812, but I did hear that America was the aggressors. Which at the time is interesting because we like just became a country. So it's not like we had a lot of time to establish ourselves, really. So the idea that we would go to war, especially against Britain at this time, is an interesting one. Because, let's be real, the war with Britain wasn't so much a case of us beating Britain, but more so a case of Britain getting tired of fighting. Like, they felt like they had wasted enough resources. It's kind of like with the whole situation with the United States and Afghanistan. It's not necessarily that we lost in Afghanistan. It's just that the resources spent on it was not worth it. So why continue? So in this case, it would be like after we left Afghanistan, Afghanistan turning around and then declaring war on us and going and trying to like take any resources we have in that area, which I'm not sure if we really have any, but like imagine if there was a really heavy colony in that area and Afghanistan just coming to invade and try to take it. Yeah, that's not a good move at all. That's a very bad move.
Atlantic, the United States Congress voted in favor of a declaration of war against Britain, the first of its kind, overseen by President James Madison. The declaration formally came into action on June 18, 1812, beginning the war. The initial war concentrated on pressure points around the Great Lakes. Anti-British sentiment was strongest in the frontier territories, as they were the most affected by the British-supported native tribal raids. William Hull was most affected by the British-supported native tribal raids.
Oh, that's what we're going to do.
William Hull led an American army into Upper Canada from Detroit on the 12th of July, declaring to British subjects who don't surrender, "The horrors and calamities of war will stalk before you." Former President Thomas Jefferson believed the war would be easy, simply a matter of marching. In truth, many Canadians were loyal to the British Empire. French-speaking Canadians worried as well that the USA would bring too many changes in politics, religion, and language. The US had a huge shipyard in Sackett's Harbour, upstate New York, to control Lake Ontario. The British attacked it, but were repelled. Major General Sir Isaac Brock had been readying troops and militia in Upper Canada in the event of a war with the USA. When the declaration of war arrived, the Canadians were ready. British forces advanced into northern Michigan
lower the volume just a little bit.
Easily overpowered US forces who were still
Hopefully it sounds
unaware
better.
of their own government's declaration. Allied with the Native American tribes, the British moved on Fort Mackinac. British forces mounted a gun against the fort, fired one shot, and the Americans surrendered. Hearing this news, William Hull quickly withdrew his inexperienced forces back to Detroit. Isaac Brock took the opportunity to move British forces on Fort Malden in Amersfoort, south of
Isaac Brock
Detroit.
sounds like a badass name.
More natives rallied in support of the British as they captured Fort Malden along the Detroit River, giving them control of the area and indeed also the fur trade. The fur must flow. Isaac Brock linked up with Tecumseh as they prepared to capture Detroit. In the Illinois Territory, American soldiers and civilians evacuated Fort Dearborn, where the city of Chicago stands today. The Potawatomi natives were under the impression they were getting the leftover supplies, but the Americans burned all the supplies, so while en route to Fort Wayne, there were attacks by young Potawatomi men. Most of the Americans were killed, the rest were captured. This brief battle would have long-lasting consequences for the Native Americans. Meanwhile, Isaac Brock and Tecumseh's forces...
Just saw that they had Andrew Jackson, who is someone who... Okay, this is going to be the first thing that I talk... I'm going to say a lot of things that people might not like to hear if they're like a really big American fan. But just know the reason why I'm saying it is because as someone who is big into accountability, I'm someone that likes to... I criticize a lot when it comes to things that I care about. I've already said before, if it's something I don't care about, normally I'm not going to talk about it. So if I am criticizing something, it's probably something I really give a damn about. I mean, just look at my opinions on Pokemon. But when it comes to America, as I said earlier, we've done a lot of different atrocities. And one of those first atrocities that we need to talk about is the Indian genocide committed by Andrew Jackson and other American generals and American presidents like him. Now, I'm someone that's hard on Turkey for its role in the Armenian genocide. And a lot of them will say, oh, it's not a genocide. I see it as a genocide. And for those people that say, oh, but what about what the Americans did to the Indian? You're right. And I call that a genocide as well. America, in my opinion, committed a genocide against the Indians with the Trail of Tears, which was pretty much the exact same thing as what happened in Turkey and Armenia, like almost the exact same thing. So if you're an American and you call the Armenian genocide a genocide, then you have to, by definition, call this a genocide because it's almost the exact same.
For the Native Americans. Meanwhile, Isaac Brock and Tecumseh's forces marched on Detroit in a show of strength. They successfully psyched out the superiorly numbered American forces who feared a massacre, so the Americans surrendered Fort Detroit. Most of the British Navy was busy keeping Napoleonic France at bay. The ships they could spare blockaded the American
Baiting
coast,
Russia,
putting pressure on trade. Most engagements with the US Navy were single duels.
Is that supposed to be nuke gunnery? Is this like a legitimate headdress that somebody wore, or is this literally nuke gunnery? Like, that's what I'm getting. Someone let me know. Is this supposed to be nuke gunnery? It looks just like them.
Trade. Most engagements with the US Navy were single duels. Days after the capture of Detroit, the
and why is he there?
Constitution dueled the HMS
I don't get the
Warrior
reference.
out on the Atlantic. Constitution's strong hull repelled some cannonballs, earning it the nickname Old Ironsides. The US Navy was very successful in these duels. Brock travelled to the east of Lake Erie as American forces amassed for a second invasion. Lieutenant General George Prevost had organised an armistice in the hope that peace could be discussed, but it didn't last. In October, the Americans tried to invade across the Niagara River, but were defeated at the Battle of Queenston Heights. Isaac Brock was killed during the battle, and Canadian leadership suffered a great loss. Major General Roger Hale Sheaffe assumed command. In early 1813, in the harsh winter, American General William Henry Harrison planned to retake Detroit, but James Winchester prematurely marched to Frenchtown for supplies and suffered a massive defeat. Some of the poorly guarded prisoners were massacred by natives. The St. Lawrence River marked the northeast frontier between USA and Upper Canada. Sneaky trade was done across the border in the early days of the war, but the Americans tried to clamp down on this with raids during the winter, which ultimately led to Canadians attacking and capturing Ogdensburg to secure their supply lines. On April 27th, US forces led a massive attack across Lake Ontario on York, the capital of Upper Canada, today known as Toronto. The Americans overwhelmed the British, but at great cost. The US burnt down the Parliament building, the library, and looted the city. The Canadians would remember this, and they would have their vengeance. Luckily for the British, Kingston was the more strategically...
Guessing that's foreshadowing for... I'm guessing that's foreshadowing for the only event that I'm familiar with in the War of 1812. Well, before the whole Battle of Baltimore thing.
Luckily for the British, Kingston was the more strategically important place for them. Towards the end of May, American forces captured Fort George on the Niagara River. British forces abandoned Fort Erie, retreating to the Burlington Heights, leaving Upper Canada in a very precarious position. The British attacked Sackett's Harbour again, but failed to capture or destroy it. In Boston Harbour, a vicious 15-minute duel occurred in which the HMS Shannon captured the USS Chesapeake by killing many of the enemy crew. It was a particularly bloody engagement. Meanwhile, back on the Niagara Peninsula, the British mounted a surprise night attack at the Battle of Stoney Creek, halting the American advance. Mistakenly fearing they were outnumbered, the Americans pulled back to Fort George. In June, the Battle of Beaver Dams saw natives and British forces halting the final advance of the US into Upper Canada.
You hear the names of all these old American battles around the time when America first became a country, and it just sounds like we're just a gigantic backwaters, just a old deep in the woods type of country. Just the battle of trees and sticks, the battles of Water River, like the battles of Chattanooga, like it's some of the weirdest names in the world, and it's like only in America.
The Canadians hadn't the forces to retake Fort George, so they decided to starve out the Americans.
The Battle of Beaver Anus.
By Lake Erie, Procter and Tecumseh's forces moved against the newly built Fort Meigs, but failed to capture it. Tecumseh did stop native warriors as they were massacring American prisoners in Fort Miami, while Procter did nothing. They tried to take Fort Meigs again, but failed. Then they tried to take Fort Stevenson, but failed. Tecumseh grew wary of Proctor. Their supply lines got cut off as American ships took up positions on Lake Erie, so Proctor and Tecumseh fell back to the Detroit River. In the southern states, warring factions of Muskogee natives escalated into the Creek War, with the U.S. fighting the Red Stick
The
Muskogee.
Creek War.
The Fort Mims massacre, in which Red Stick Muskogees captured Fort Mims along the Alabama River and killed hundreds of its inhabitants, including civilians, got the US government involved in the war. This war not only had British involvement, but Spanish involvement too.
Okay, interesting. It said that got the U.S. government in the war. Now, I know at the time, the United States government and the states themselves were kind of separated. They weren't really, like, together yet. So I'm guessing up until this point, it was just a bunch of, like, state militias that were fighting. It wasn't until, like, the Civil War that America really became solidified. But somebody have to explain that to me a little bit further. Now, I know that this video isn't so, like, with any video that I react to, or any video that you happen to see on the internet, always do deeper research. I mean, this is a video that I'm taking as a jump off point. Everything that I hear in here, I'm not going to just go with and say, oh, this is 100% fact, because I don't know. There could be some details that are wrong. There could be some details that aren't given proper context. There could be some details that don't have enough information. So it's up to me and up to the person that's listening to this to do your work and do further research into it. Treat any video that you happen to see online as, let's say, a jump off point. Something to get you initially started on the subject.
This war not only had British involvement, but Spanish involvement too. In September, 9 US ships on Lake Erie defeated and captured 6 British Royal Navy vessels, ensuring American control on one of the Great Lakes, so the British evacuated Fort Detroit and Fort Malden. As Harrison's forces pushed their advantage, they were victorious at the Battle of the Thames, in which Tecumseh was killed. The Indian Confederacy crumbled without his leadership. Capturing Montreal would have been very effective for the Americans.
I wonder if there's a what if history related video that talks about what happened if Tecumseh managed to survive and he was able to keep the Native American Federation together. Like what that would have looked like in a modern America. Like what influence would have had? Would America be the country it is today? Would there be like a piece of the American or continental U.S. that would have like a section that is closed off to Indian or Native Americans? Like how exactly would that have worked out? I would like to see some type of what if. Somebody get that to Alternate History Hub. See if he can do a video on that.
Capturing Montreal would have been very effective for the Americans, but an invasion attempt in October was repelled by well-placed Canadian and native defenders. As the Canadian winter set in, the Americans abandoned Fort George in December and, on the way home, set fire to Newark, leaving the villagers to freeze in the snow. The British captured Fort Niagara and burnt down Lewiston in retaliation. The British, along with Mohawk allies, pursued the survivors through the snow. Tuscaroras stepped in defense of the fleeing civilians. It was not a peaceful Christmas. Just before the New Year, the British burnt Buffalo in New York. In April 1814, Napoleon was defeated in Europe. So Britain was now able to concentrate a little more on that pesky war with the Americans, and indeed send reinforcements across the Atlantic. General George Prevost, backed by 15,000 British reinforcements, was ordered to take control of the Great Lakes. This resulted in a fairly lackluster race of shipbuilding on Lake Ontario between the British and Americans, which amounted to very little. During British blockades and raids on the southern states, many enslaved people escaped and were freed. Many resettled in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Some even joined the British forces, taking up arms against their former slave owners.
Now, this is another thing I'm going to say because one of the comments that I got in, I don't know if it was this video or if it was another video, but I was somebody said something about how America was one of the first countries to like free slaves or something like that. Or at least they kept on bringing up other countries. Like, well, other countries have slaves. And I was like, yeah, but other countries also don't have slaves. What's your point? But one of the things that I ended up telling them was you do realize that there were other countries, a lot of countries actually, that freed slaves way before America did. As a matter of fact, if it weren't for the Civil War itself, America would have freed their slaves even longer or further than they did in this timeline. The reason why the slaves were freed in 1865 in America is because the Civil War forced its hand. If it weren't for the Civil War, the South would have, if they would have agreed to not expanding slavery, then the North would have just let them have their slaves until eventually they felt that it died out naturally. How many years would it have taken for slavery to die out naturally? 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Are we looking at a scenario in which slaves are freed around the turn of the century? Like, there were, like, well, first of all, throughout history, there were hundreds of countries that free, or hundreds of civilizations, let's put it that way, that freed slaves before America did. But even in the 19th century, there were how many countries that freed slaves before America? The UK, France, Haiti, Spain, Russia. Like, when you talk about all these different countries, and not to mention, like I said in the past, with the Qin dynasty, they freed their slaves back in like 2 BC. And you talk about Cyrus the Great and the civilization he had, they freed their slaves even before that. So America wasn't revolutionary when it came to slaves. As I said to this person, America freed their slaves kicking and screaming. Like, there was no, oh, well, they just let their slaves go. No, they fought a war for it. Most of the other countries that I listed didn't fight a war to free their slaves because there was no other side forcing the hand of like slavery. Like, they were, both sides agreed, yeah, we should probably, stop this whole slave thing. Only America was the country I was like, yeah, maybe we should stop slavery over my dead body. And then they had a war over it. Again, I'm still proud to be an American, but these are things that you have to look back on and be honest with yourself. You can't sit there and say, oh, America was proactive when it came to freeing their slaves, because they weren't. That's just the thing.
The Americans had gotten their act together and were on the attack. In July, they captured Fort Erie under General Winfield Scott. Canadian forces under General Phineas Riel arrived too late and were brutally defeated at the Battle of Chippewa. Americans pushed on but were stopped at Lundy's Lane near Niagara Falls. The battle was inconclusive, but the Americans were now outnumbered, so they fell back to Fort Erie. They withstood a British siege, even repelling several massive direct assaults. In the southern states, General Andrew Jackson led the U.S. to victory against the Upper Creek Red Sticks. The resulting treaty led to more Muskogee territory being ceded to the USA. The war with Britain had been putting massive pressure on everyone's economies, so peace negotiations between Britain and the USA began in Ghent in Flanders. But that didn't stop them from planning new invasions. In August 1814, British forces under General Robert Ross and General Sir George Cockburn...
That does not say Cockburn. That doesn't say Cockburn. I don't know if that was intentional or not. Maybe he said Cockburn to like avoid some type of strike or something. Not strike, but to avoid some type of community guidelines violation. But oh, that's funny. That is, yeah, that is misfortunate. That is sad. Damn. I feel bad for this man and his, oh my goodness.
British forces under General Robert Ross and General Sir George Cockburn pushed right up through Chesapeake Bay towards the U.S. capital, Washington.
Damn.
They defeated American forces at Bladensburg and pressed their advantage against the capital. US President Madison and many others evacuated the city as the British approached. They captured the city and burnt the White House, the Capitol building, and many other public buildings. Shortly after, a powerful storm hit the city, and the British ultimately pulled back to their ships. It was the only time the United States capital city has ever been held by a foreign power. Soon after, the British moved on the city of Baltimore, but were unable to capture it. The bombardment of Fort McHenry inspired Francis Scott Key to write the poem that would become the Star-Spangled Banner, later the American national anthem.
Okay, now I'm going to... All right, 1 second. And then verse 3 says, no refuge can save the hurling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. Yeah, I've heard stories that talk about the rest of the verses in the Star-Spangled Banner, in which case one is very racist. Now, I don't know anything about the context of it. I haven't actually read it. I do know it mentions slave. I don't know in what context, and I don't know if people say that it's racist just because it says the word slave, in which case I don't think it is. But again, I haven't read it, so I'm not going to make a judgment on that. But I'm going to clear up some things about that last video that I talked about real quick, because I go into it, I think, in more detail in another video I did called How the Star-Spangled Banner Became an American Pastime, in which case, watch that video. It's by Today I Found Out. And that is an actual American inspirational story. When you talk about a story that doesn't need embellishments, a story that doesn't need to be faked or given bullcrap details in order to make it better, that is a story about actual American patriotism, American bravery, and something that should make you proud to be an American when you listen to it. So watch that if you want actual American inspiration. But when it comes to this particular situation, Fort McHenry was not a fort that had women, children, all this other stuff that the story talked about. That's not true. So the idea that American patriot bodies of women and children in them were holding up the flag, 100% bullshit. Complete and utter made up. All the details in which he talked about Francis Scott Key talking to the people that were in the cargoes being held as prisoners of war on the British ships. And they were asking him, tell us if the flag is still up. Tell us if the flag is still up. 100% bullshit, 100% made up. That did not happen. That conversation never happened. There were no prisoners of war and all other stuff on that ship. Francis Scott Key was there to negotiate for one person's release, and that person was a family friend of his. That is it. So that entire scenario in which they talked about is 100% made up. Only 4 people died in the bombing of Fort McHenry. So again, there were no piles of bodies holding up a flag or anything like that. And the flag itself was raised after the bombing. This was not something that was standing up during the bombing. It was something that was brought up after the bombing was completed. The flag is still on display. I forgot exactly where it's at display, but the flag itself is on display, and you can see it. It's just that wasn't the flag that was flown during the bombing. It wouldn't even make no sense that the British would waste ammo trying to bomb a flag itself, as opposed to trying to bomb the fort or trying to bomb the ammo depot so it can try to get the fort to explode. Like, the idea that they would just go after a flag itself makes no sense. The person that told the story was not a historian, so the idea that people are taking this story as 100% fact absolutely baffles me. The story was told by a pastor or a minister or whatever. I don't know if there's a difference between the two, but it was told by a minister, and it was just used, like I said, as an embellishment to try to get some type of patriotic feelings or whatever. I'm not a fan of misinformation. I'm not a fan of fake news. So already when I was listening to the story, I was getting a lot of, this doesn't make any sense. Why would this happen? Why would this happen? Why would this happen? The British did not send their entire fleet of British ships to this one fort, like the story said. That's complete and utter garbage. They wouldn't need to do that. It wouldn't make any sense for them to send the entire fleet of the British Navy to that one fort. Doesn't make any sense. But it sounds inspirational, I guess, even though you don't really explain why they would be going to, like, what makes that fort so significant. Yeah, like I said, I'm somebody that don't like misinformation. So if I hear something that doesn't make any sense, I'm going to talk about it. Now, if it turns out that it's true, I'm going to admit it that I was wrong. I have no problem admitting that, but I'm going to let it be known that I am sensing bullshit, just like I did in that last video. So whether you like it or you don't, then this channel likely isn't for you. And if you want someone that's just going to blindly praise a country just for the sake of praising a country, then I suggest you go find some YouTuber from that's really big into the People's Republic of China or the North Korean government. Oh wait, that's right, you can't, because they don't probably, I don't think they can get on YouTube. Oh my gosh, well, what do you know? But try to find someone that is going to kiss the government's ass, because I'm not someone that does it. Sorry, but I don't.
From Lower Canada, General Prévost led a force to outside of Plattsburgh, but held back on attacking, insisting on waiting for Navy forces to take control of Lake Champlain. He forced the HMS Confiance into a premature attack, resulting in British defeat on the water. Prévost then withdrew completely. The British higher-ups were furious, and he would later return to London and prepare for a court-martial. British forces invaded northern Massachusetts, which would later become Maine. They held many positions there till the end of the war. The brand new HMS St. Lawrence was armed to the teeth and ensured British control of Lake Ontario for the rest of the war. As winter approached, the Americans in Fort Erie retreated and destroyed the fort. Down south, Jackson moved his forces to attack the British and Spanish in Pensacola, Florida, for arming the Red Sticks. He then moved his forces to New Orleans to fortify the city, as British naval forces increased attacks on the southern coast. Meanwhile, in Ghent, the British were demanding control of the Great Lakes and an Indian barrier state in the northwest, which they would sponsor and hopefully hold back American expansionism. The Americans were having none of it. The Duke of Wellington suggested that Britain wasn't in a good position to make such demands and should politely go back to the status quo. The Treaty of Ghent was signed in December 1814 and proposed no border changes between Canada and the United States. Word of the peace treaty spread slowly. The Britain, Canada, and the United States. Word of
the state existing before the war. I know antebellum means like before. I forgot exactly what it means, but I know that normally when people refer to antebellum America, they're talking about before the Civil War. So when it says the states existing before the war, I don't know if it means before the War of 1812 or before the Civil War.
Of the peace treaty spread slowly. The British assault on New Orleans went ahead in January 1815, but American forces successfully repelled it. Word eventually came of the treaty, and all forces withdrew from occupied territories. And thus the War of 1812 ended in 1815. America's economy actually came out better off in this war, with many banks having been set up to fund the war. Many factories were opened.
That's already a big-ass red flag. I'm guessing this is the start of the military-industrial complex, which is another thing that I can't really put it against America, because the military-industrial complex profits off of just about any war, or for anybody that's willing to buy weapons and stuff from them. But the fact that America didn't heed the words of Dwight D. Eisenhower when he talked about the dangers of the military-industrial complex is another bad mark on us. That's something that we should have been proactive when it came to trying to prevent.
With many banks having been set up to fund the war. Many factories were opened due to the British-shaped gap in the market during the war, which really helped kickstart America's Industrial Revolution. General Prévost died before his court-martial in London. As disastrous as the end of his career was, he did hold off American conquest. Some American military leaders would go on to become president. William Henry Harrison would become the shortest-lasting U.S. president. Andrew Jackson, while as president, would force out the natives in the southern states in the Trail of Tears. Besides minor border issues, the United States and Canada would remain at peace with each other, even sharing territory for a while during the 19th century, as they both expanded across North America. America and Britain would become close allies into the 20th century. The War of 1812 remains a strange episode in North American history. Many Americans say they won it, many Canadians say they won it.
Yeah, I don't know.
The natives most certainly lost. One thing is for sure,
Yeah.
this war awoke America's desire for a strong military. They never again wanted to be caught unawares, and beyond a war with Mexico came the grueling American Civil War, fighting over states' rights to enslave people.
Yeah. I'm glad
The
he
20th century
specified that
saw
one.
the USA's military grow to become the largest in the world. Canada chose a slightly more chilled approach.
Thank you again, John D. Ruddy. Wait a minute, illustrations by him. Yeah, I figured it was from him, but I just wanted to see who exactly did the drawings and stuff. Also, how it's done, because you can tell it has like a very marker style to it, but the way it looks like something that is done on some type of software. So it would be interesting to see like how his process is. He might have a video where he actually shows what he does, but if he doesn't, it would be interesting to check it out. Nowadays, thinking back on like the relationship between America and Canada, it's crazy to think that we would go to war, because I would say Canada is our closest ally. Like, Canada is our closest ally. When you talk about like going to war, I can see America going to war with any country before it goes to war with Canada. If anything, Canada would more than like sooner join America than go to war with it. But I mean, I doubt they would want to get rid of all of their social programs. By the way, for those of you that don't know what communism is, Canada is more social than we are, and they look like they're doing just fine. There's a lot of people that, well, again, I'm not going to talk about it, but there's a lot of people that don't know what the hell communism or socialism is. They'll just use the term as a buzzword, and they seem to not realize that America has a ton of social programs in it already. When you talk about Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, when you talk about the police force, firefighters, our military, all that stuff is social programs. So if you have a problem with social programs, you have a problem with that, next time you call the police, if they happen to charge you for it, then that would be more capitalism. But yes, America is a social country already. Any idea that like socializing Medicare or socializing medicine more is going to turn into a communist country, it makes me freaking pissed off when I hear people say dumb stuff like that. Like it's going to magically make America a communist country. But as I said, Canada is our closest ally. UK is probably our second closest ally. But Canada is so close that like we share cultures pretty much. Like, which is interesting because Canada also has Quebec. And I would say Quebec would probably be slightly behind the UK as far as like our relativity culturally to each other. Like, it's interesting. But for all the Canadian brothers and sisters watching this video, we're glad to have you around. America's been going through some stuff lately. Hopefully you guys can just stick with us. At some point, sense will be brought back to America, and we'll stop acting like some damn fools, scared of our own shadows. A lot of people exploiting us as far as like fear and making people scared to freaking, I was about to say go outside, but there's people that are probably trying to politicize that somehow. When I say scared to go outside, I mean it in the sense that like outside isn't something that you should fear. So when people say, you know, I mean, with the whole COVID situation, I know some people are going to try to say that I'm talking about one thing when I'm not. But yeah, America has a long way to go. And that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with saying that. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that America has a long way to go. the idea that people have when they say that America is the best country in the world or the greatest country in the world or it's the number one country in the world, it's wrong. I mean, it becomes, I don't know why someone would even want to say that. It becomes complacent, or it makes you become complacent, because if you're acknowledging that there's nothing wrong with something, then you're acknowledging that there's nothing that needs to be fixed. And with me, no matter what something is, even if it is objectively the best, I'm still going to try to find flaws just so I can fix those. Like, I'm with the Michael Jordan mindset. Like, no matter what you might be good at, there is definitely something that you're not good at, and you should always be looking at it and always be looking to improve. So that's the reason why I tend to nitpick stuff. I tend to let stuff that I'm cool with go. I don't normally, when I talk about America, you don't hear me saying, like, praising a lot of the stuff in it, because I'm too busy enjoying it. Like, all the stuff that I like about America, I'm too busy enjoying that. I'm focusing on the stuff that I have a problem with when it comes to, like, our political system or our healthcare or some of the people in this country that seem to be a bit too comfortable when it comes to not appreciating education, or not appreciating the scientific method, or when it comes to not appreciating like the process when it comes to logical arguments. That's the type of stuff that I have an issue with, that I want to fix. When it comes to social issues, when it comes to civil issues, and people's lack of comfort when it comes to even talking or bringing that type of stuff up, that is stuff that I want to rectify. But I mean, that's my opinions on ways to make America better. Now, again, because I acknowledge that I want America to be better, does that mean America's bad? No, it's not. Does that mean America hasn't done bad things? We've done bad things in the past. As much as people want to say America is the land of the free and home of the brave and this, that, and the other, America in its past has committed a lot of different atrocities throughout history, or throughout its history. When you talk about overthrowing duly elected democracies, when you talk about establishing dictatorships in other countries simply because those dictators support our interest, when you talk about destabilizing regions around the world, when you talk about establishing banana republics, or at least helping to enforce banana republics in Central America and South America and things like that. Like, America is the perfect country for people that live inside of America. For the people outside of America that see it from the outside looking in, their experience with America is very different. And the problem is, people in America don't want to acknowledge those. Like, Chris Rock said it best when he said, America's like that uncle that put you through college and helped buy your first car and helped set you up with your first house and things, but also the uncle that molested you when you were younger. Like, America's like that. For those of you that happen to get offended by that joke, just remember, now you're the snowflakes. But yeah, America has some problems in the past. And like I said, a lot of people that are outside will acknowledge those problems. It's just that we will dismiss those people because they're talking down on America. Like, a lot of the problems we have today stem from the things that America did, especially during the Cold War, when we were fighting against communism. We did a lot of heinous things to try to prevent the spread of communism. And if you guys want to learn more about that, I mean, just look it up. I mean, I have no problem doing videos about it. Maybe one day I will do videos about, like, the things America's done during the Cold War that should definitely get a second look. But yeah, as much as I dish out criticism of other countries out there like China, North Korea, Iran, Turkey, and all these other places, I have no problem pointing the finger back at my own country and saying, yeah, we fucked up a lot in the past, and we definitely got to get our shit together on a lot of stuff still. So by no means think that I'm just pointing at your country and ignoring the things that my country did, because I definitely am not. Anyway, I'm Devon DaVinci. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share. I look forward to seeing you guys on a future video. And until then, I'm signing out and I'm giving you the deuces. Peace.